All right, who's ready for chapter 2 of The Winged Watchman? This chapter is called The Satchel. Are you ready? Do you remember where we left off with the puppy getting to go home, and they had to come home at the late of night, and they had to kind of try to stay in the shadows so that they wouldn't get shot by the German guards that were patrolling, or the land watchers, who were local people, like young people and what have you, that would watch. They weren't part of the military, they weren't part of the army, but they were like local citizens who would, they were kind of like, they worked for the German soldiers. Like they figured that they could get free stuff and things like that, or get like, stay safer, like that their farms would be left alone to their families, or that they would make money if they would report on their friends and family about what they were doing. Terrible, terrible, terrible. So, chapter 2, The Satchel. Mother was shocked when father told her that Leendert Schlederhans had become a land watcher. And the parents, such good Catholics, she cried. Grunted father. You women always judge people by what they do in church. I judge them by what they do outside. Farmer Schneiderhans is getting rich in the black market. Mother was silenced, but she felt sorry for the Schneiderhans parents, all the same. After the family rosary that night, she added a Hail Mary for them. Mother added so many Hail Marys that Joris sometimes thought he'd get holes in his knees. Mother prayed for Queen Wilhelmina in England and the princesses in Canada. She prayed for the Pope and for the Allies, but at first she would not pray for the Germans, though father said that that was wrong. We have to pray for our enemies, he said. What sort of a Christian are you? So then mother prayed for the Germans too. Mostly, however, she prayed for the people she knew, for Mrs. Jansen and for Dr. Dave Rise, and for Uncle Cor, and for all mother's Jewish friends, and for all the children, and for Father Kobus, the parish priest. Whenever they heard of a tragedy, mother had to pray about that too. Occasionally, there was a moment's relief as when Trixie joined the family prayers, knelt on her chubby little knees. Remember, she's just 3, remember the little red-headed curly girl? Squeezed her eyes shut and murmured devoutly, Mary, Mary, quite contrary. While life at the mill went on in its gentle way, the Allies were attacking the German positions in France and Belgium. It looked as if mother's vegetables, sown in subjection, would be harvested in liberty. But at present, the enemy still held Holland in a tight grip. One afternoon early in August, Leendert Schneiderhans strutted about in his fine new uniform. He was tremendously satisfied with himself. At last, he was appreciated properly. The Germans realized that he was a leader, not a person to do rough and menial labor. Der Fuhrer knew that when the world was divided between slaves and supermen and had liberated him, Leendert Schneiderhans, from further drudgery of his father's stupid farm. Now he had power. Now he could show the talents he possessed. Let everyone beware. Leendert had only to say one word, point a finger, and the German police would pounce. His eyes peered sharply in all directions. They did not see the beauty of the summer afternoon, the shimmering haze over the nodding wheat with its sprinkling of poppies and cornflowers. No, they were searching for something to report. A little turkey. Not just a turkey. Not a good person. In his mind, Leendert already tasted the triumph of a sensational discovery, a forbidden hoard of food. For instance, he shifted his rifle, pushed out his chest, and he felt on top of the world. Suddenly, he spied a girl with a heavy satchel over her shoulder. She was toiling on a bike. It was a poor bike with wooden tires, but still a bike. And all bicycles that were not for essential work had been requisitioned by the Germans long ago. So requisitioned, they took them. So if you had your bikes, they would take them. They didn't care that they belonged to you. They were like, we need those. Give us your bikes. So this girl had deliberately kept hers. So this is Leendert thinking. So he's little Mr. Turkey Bird. So just remember that. That was a major offense. That's not for real. That's him thinking that. Okay, don't forget that. Leendert bristled with indignation. How dare she? The nerve of this little brat to defy the whole German Wehrmacht. She looked impudent too, thin and wiry with tousled tawny curls, an upturned nose, audacious gray eyes. Halt, he thundered, pointing his rifle at her. Give me that bicycle. Please, she pleaded, I must reach Leyden before curfew. I've been visiting my uncle. Uncle nothing, barked Leendert. You've no right to that bike. He wrenched it out of her hands. Then she surprised him. She flung her heavy satchel into the bushes and went for him like a wildcat, so suddenly that he dropped his rifle. You sneak, she hissed, you traitor. He could not defend himself very well because he was holding the bicycle. He had not expected so much strength in a girl no older than 12 and obviously undernourished. She kicked his shin, scratched his cheek, and worse, she hurt his dignity. He dropped the bike, grabbed the girl by her shoulders, and flung her down with such a force that her head struck the cobbles and she sprawled motionless. Leendert stared at her. As she lay there, her lashes dark against her white cheeks, he felt a sudden panic. Picking up his rifle, he leaped on the bike, which was too low for him, and pedaled off, his knees almost knocking his chin. He left her there. He hurt her, and he left her there. Joris and Dirk Jan met him on their way to Farmer Poot to buy milk. They were rather nervous when they saw him coming, for land watchers were supposed to prevent people from buying food more than their rations allowed. That the rations weren't enough didn't matter. Dirk Jan hid the telltale pail behind his back, but he shouldn't have bothered. Leendert didn't even look at them. Hold on, my little thing messed up. There we go. He went straight on as fast as he could go, and he cut such a ridiculous figure on the girl's bike that Joris and Dirk Jan couldn't help laughing. Then Joris explained, Oh, look, there's a girl lying on the road. The boys began to run. That's where the bike came from, panted Joris. When they reached the girl, they got a fright. She looked as if she were dead. Dirk Jan knelt by her and felt her pulse. Her heart is still beating, he whispered. Joris, you run and get Dr. De Vries. Tell him to hurry. I'll take care of her. Joris was already on his way, his wooden shoes clacking over the cobbles. The village wasn't far, and the doctor's house was one of the first, a big white villa behind a carefully clipped yew hedge. Joris flung open the white gate, dashed up the front steps, and tugged at the bell as if he wanted to pull it out of its socket. To the neat little maid who opened the door, he gasped, The doctor! There's been an accident! There's a girl lying in the road! The maid ran into the doctor's study. He came out at once, and he grabbed his black case. Where? He asked. On the road. There. Already a group of people had gathered around the girl, giving all sorts of advice, but Dirk Jan stood guard. He wouldn't let anyone touch her. The doctor must see her first, he said, and he had shaded her face and loosened her collar. The doctor uttered a cry of dismay when he saw her. Raina! He exclaimed. Then he immediately became professional and started to examine her. It's a concussion, he said. Is there anyone here who can get me some sort of a bed or a stretcher on which to carry her? I'll take her to my house. She is my niece. An onlooker who lived nearby said he had an old door. That will be fine, said Dr. De Vries, and the man ran to fetch it. The doctor tried to revive the little girl without success. He breathed a sigh of relief when the man returned carrying the door with the help of his wife. They had also brought a blanket. The doctor arranged the blanket on the door and lifted his niece onto the improvised stretcher. Several men carried her to the doctor's house where the maid opened the door. The doctor hushed all exclamations. He had the men bring Raina to a guest room on the second floor, and there they laid her gently on the bed. The maid helped. There was no other woman in the house, for Mrs. De Vries had been killed during the bombardment of Rotterdam. The doctor now dismissed the crowd. Outside, the people talked in groups. It's a shame. Such a fine girl. Well, if there's anything that could be done for her, our doctor will do it. Slowly, they dispersed, leaving only Dirk Jan and Joris. The boys felt responsible. They had found Raina, and they wanted to know if Leendert had done the girl any serious harm. Enkel de Vries, the doctor's son, saw them standing outside and joined them. What happened? He asked, sitting down on the gate. Schneiderhans took her bike and knocked her down, said Dirk Jan. "The swine," muttered Angle, looking grim. The front door opened and Dr. DeVries appeared. "She has come too," he told the boys, "but she keeps talking about a satchel. Has any of you seen a satchel? It seems important." "I'll go and look," said George. Do you guys remember when Lena came at her? She threw the satchel. Okay. So I'll go and look, said George, and ran off. The others wanted to follow him, but Dr. DeVries held them back. "I don't know what is in the satchel, but it might be just as well to not draw too much attention to it," he warned. The boys understood. So, like, instead of a group of them going, like only one go, because if a group went, then it'd be like, what are they looking for? What's that about? And we'll see why that's important. "I don't know what's in the satchel, but it might be just as well to not draw too much attention to it," he warned. Joris ran until a thought struck him. What if there was something valuable in that satchel? Something people might steal. Then it would be better not to show that he was looking for it. So he slowed to a walk and tried to seem unconcerned as possible, kind of looking around, acting like nothing's going on. The road lay deserted in the golden glow of the late afternoon. Joris looked one way and then another. Not a soul in sight. He found the spot where Raina had fallen and searched the bushes until he saw the satchel. It had burst open, and when he bent to pick it up, his heart gave a thump, for he recognized the letterhead on the bundle of papers inside. Het Haru, the illegal newspaper he'd seen his father read sometimes. Never mention this to anyone, his father had warned him. The Germans put people into concentration camps for less. They don't want us to know the truth. Now Joris had to bring a satchel full of these dangerous papers into plain daylight over the public road to the doctor's house. He felt a sinking sensation in his stomach. His hands trembled as he closed the straps of the satchel. Slinging it over his shoulder, he peered out into the road. What if Leendert came back? Leendert would know it was Raina's satchel. There was a man coming along the road, probably just a villager, but Joris thought it better to wait. He ducked under the bushes and lay still until the man had passed by. Then he went out onto the road. He forced himself to walk slowly. The satchel weighed his shoulder down. What a plucky girl Raina must be. I like her. She was probably doing this all the time. Behind him sounded the chug chug of a motorbike. Joris didn't have time to turn to know it was a German. Only Germans had motorbikes or could obtain gasoline. All he could do was walk quietly and quickly on. To his consternation, the motorbike stopped when it caught up with him. Uh-oh. A gruff voice asked, "Utrecht," pointing to the east. Joris glanced fleetingly at the German officer and nodded. The motor started again and disappeared in a cloud of dust. Joris suddenly began to run. He didn't care who saw him. He just wanted to get off that road. The doctor must have been watching for him because the door of his house was opened as soon as Joris arrived at the gate. Dr. DeVries took the satchel with a relieved thank you. "Oh, that's splendid, boy. Raina will be so happy. As soon as she is a little recovered, you must come and see her so she can thank you herself. You and your brother have been most helpful. You have no idea how grateful I am. Your brother has gone with Engel to do an errand for me at the druggist's, and he said he still had milk to fetch. He left a message that you were not to wait for him." Joris felt proud and happy. He was also very glad to go home. Somehow the Watchman seemed a wonderfully safe place to go. That, my dears, is the end of chapter 2. So when we get back together, we will be at chapter 3, and it's called Parachutes. Oh my goodness, it's getting good.